Imagine being tailgated on a dark military base at night, blinded by headlights, and then pulled over by the very guy who caused it, only for him to demand a ticket that could end your career. That's what happened to my dad in the Marine Corps. But what that power-hungry MP didn't know was that months later, my dad would have the perfect chance to serve him cold, brutal justice. If you've ever dreamed of seeing someone in power get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up, because this is one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. And trust me, it's military justice at its finest. The year was the mid-1980s. My dad was serving in the Marine Corps, stationed on base. Nights there had a certain quiet, an almost eerie stillness. The kind of silence where even the hum of your engine feels too loud, bouncing off the flat roads and distant barracks. It was well past midnight when he got into his car to head across base. The roads were practically empty. Just him, the low drone of his tires against the asphalt, and the dim glow of streetlights flickering every few hundred feet. He wasn't thinking about much, just another late drive on base, one he'd done countless times. But then, out of nowhere, the calm shattered. A burst of light exploded behind him. A pair of headlights. No, 3 mirrors full of blinding white. The truck came out of nowhere, pulling up so close to his rear bumper he could barely see. Every angle of his vision filled with glare, beams burning into his eyes. He adjusted his mirrors, raised a hand to block the light, but it was useless. The brightness stabbed through, searing his retinas, making his heartbeat pick up. At first, he thought, maybe they'll pass me. Maybe it's just some impatient driver. But the truck didn't pass. It stuck. He eased his foot on the gas, nudging his speed just a little higher, hoping to create some space. But the truck mirrored him, inch for inch, mile for mile. Closer. Brighter. Unrelenting. He felt his jaw tighten, knuckles whitening against the steering wheel. 5 minutes. That's how long it lasted. 5 minutes of being hunted down the dark base roads, eyes stinging, vision blurred, pulse pounding harder with each second. Finally, he pressed the pedal just a little harder. He wasn't flooring it, just easing up to put some breathing room between him and the truck. But the instant he did, the trap was sprung. The truck's lights shifted, red and blue flashing through the night. Military police. My dad's stomach sank. The white truck screeched its siren, signaling him to pull over. He did, rolling to the side of the quiet road, blinking against the light stabbing at his rear window. A door slammed. Boots crunched against gravel. The MP walked up, young, cocky, still practically a kid. A Lance Corporal. My dad rolled his window down, still half-blinded. License and registration. You were speeding. My dad blinked at him, disbelief burning through the exhaustion in his veins. Are you serious? You were tailgating me so close I couldn't see a damn thing. You blinded me the whole way. I sped up just to keep from getting rear-ended. But the Lance Corporal wasn't interested in explanations. He wasn't there for truth. His smirk said it all. He wanted a win, a power trip, a ticket to wave around like a trophy. And in that moment, my dad knew exactly what was at stake. Because on a military base, a speeding ticket isn't just an inconvenience. It's not a slap on the wrist. It can wreck you, delay promotions, tarnish your record, haunt you for years. And here was this kid, this arrogant MP, dead set on making sure that happened. The Lance Corporal stood there, ticket book in hand, his chest puffed out like he was the judge, jury, and executioner of the entire base. His tone wasn't just official, it was dripping with smugness. You were speeding, he repeated, his pen already hovering over the page. My dad took a breath, steadying himself. I sped up because you were on my bumper. You blinded me with your high beams. I had no choice. But the kid wasn't listening. He wasn't interested in context, in fairness, in the truth. He wanted to write that ticket. He wanted power. And then, just when it looked like this was going to spiral out of control, another set of headlights approached. Another MP vehicle rolled up, crunching gravel as it pulled alongside. This time, it wasn't another Lance Corporal. It was a corporal, a rank higher. The corporal stepped out, calm but authoritative, and walked over. What's going on here? The Lance Corporal snapped to attention, his voice sharp, caught him speeding. Writing him a ticket, Corporal. The corporal turned his gaze to my dad, steady and unreadable. Is that so? My dad explained everything, his voice measured, respectful. He described the blinding lights, the tailgating, the way he'd been forced to adjust his speed just to keep from getting rear-ended. For a moment, silence hung in the air. The corporal studied him, then glanced back at the younger MP. "That doesn't sound like a ticket to me," he said flatly. The Lance Corporal's head whipped around. "With respect, Corporal, he was speeding. Regulations are clear." The corporal's jaw tightened. "And with respect, you caused the situation. If you tailgated him and blinded him with your lights, you are the problem here." The younger MP bristled. "But—" "No ticket," the corporal cut him off. His tone left no room for debate. But the Lance Corporal didn't let it go. He argued. He gestured. His voice rose, sharp with indignation. Imagine the arrogance, challenging someone who outranked him, all because he couldn't stand to lose. My dad sat there in his car, silent but seething inside. His heart thumped hard in his chest. Because even though the corporal had shut it down, he knew what this meant. If the Lance Corporal had gotten his way, if that ticket had stuck, it could have derailed everything. Promotions delayed. His record stained. His reputation tarnished. For what? For nothing. And that's when the deeper realization sank in. This wasn't just a one-off mistake. This Lance Corporal wasn't unlucky, he was a predator. Someone who used the badge not to protect, but to punish. How many other Marines had he screwed over just to flex his power? As the corporal dismissed him with a firm nod, "You're free to go, Sergeant," my dad pulled away from the stop, the red and blue lights fading in his mirrors. But he wasn't relieved. Not really. Because humiliation cuts deep. He'd been treated like a criminal, his career dangled over a cliff by some arrogant kid who should have been protecting him instead of targeting him. That face. That arrogance. The absolute refusal to listen. My dad didn't know it yet, but fate wasn't finished with the Lance Corporal. And when their paths crossed again, months later, the balance of power would shift in a way that no one could have predicted. Months passed. Life in the Corps rolled on like it always does, drills, duties, training. My dad had tucked that night away in the back of his mind, but not forgotten it. Marines are good at burying things, but not at erasing them. See, my dad had a very particular job. He was a shooting range coach. Now, if you've never been in the Marine Corps, you might not understand just how critical the yearly shooting qualification is. It's not some casual test you can breeze through. It's a mandatory evaluation, and if you fail, your entire career teeters on the edge. Promotions stall. Disciplinary action looms. Rumors spread. Every Marine has to pass, no matter their role. And as a coach, my dad wasn't just teaching. He was a guardian of safety. His eyes were trained for mistakes, because on a live range, mistakes don't just cost points. They can cost lives. And when a Marine screws up in a way that compromises safety, the coach has one duty: throw them off the range. No questions. No exceptions. That's the kind of responsibility my dad carried. So picture this, it's a bright morning on the firing range. The smell of gun oil and hot brass hangs in the air. Rows of Marines line up in blocks, rifles in hand, the sun glinting off barrels. Coaches pace back and forth, sharp-eyed, watching every movement. My dad scanned the line that day, just like always. Same routine, same rhythm. And then he saw him. That face. The Lance Corporal. The very same MP who had tailgated him, blinded him, and tried to write him a ticket that could have wrecked his future. For a moment, my dad froze. The memories came flooding back. The blinding lights, the smug smirk, the way he argued with a higher rank like he was untouchable. And then, a slow smile crept across my dad's face. Fate had just delivered him the perfect chance. Without hesitation, he walked up to another coach, leaned in, and said quietly, "Switch with me." The other coach frowned. "Why?" "I'll explain later," my dad muttered, eyes locked on the Lance Corporal. The coach shrugged and agreed. And just like that, my dad was officially assigned as the Lance Corporal's range coach for the day. The Lance Corporal didn't notice at first. Just another Marine in line, waiting to prove himself. But when my dad stepped up close, his shadow falling over him, the realization hit. My dad's voice was calm, deliberate, and low enough that only he could hear. "Do you remember me?" The Lance Corporal stiffened. His eyes dropped to the ground. His voice came out small, almost ashamed. "Yes, Sergeant." My dad leaned in closer, his words slicing through the noise of the range like a blade. "You have one chance. One mistake. One tiny slip, and your ass is done." The color drained from the Lance Corporal's face. In that moment, the power had shifted. The hunter had just become the hunted. The Lance Corporal swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he tightened his grip on his rifle. The range was alive with noise, rifle bolts clacking, coaches barking orders, the pop-pop-pop of live rounds echoing against the distant berm. But for him, the only thing that existed was the man standing a step behind him. My dad. His presence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He didn't have to yell, didn't have to posture. He just stood there, eyes locked, waiting. Watching. Like a hawk circling overhead, waiting for the smallest slip. And the Lance Corporal knew it. He could feel that stare burning into the back of his neck with every move he made. Fire when ready, a voice called across the line. The Marines raised their rifles. Shots cracked, brass clinked against concrete. The Lance Corporal was good. Too good. He shouldered his rifle, controlled his breathing, squeezed his shots clean. Round after round punched into the target with precision. He was crisp, disciplined. A textbook shooter. My dad didn't flinch. He didn't give him the satisfaction of a nod or a word. Just silence. Unblinking, unshaking silence. Because this wasn't about his aim. This wasn't about marksmanship. This was about patience. See, Marines could go an entire day on the range without slipping, but fatigue wears on you. Stress eats at your edges. And under pressure, mistakes happen. And no one had ever been under pressure like this Lance Corporal was now. Every time he moved to reload, my dad's gaze followed. Every time he adjusted his stance, my dad's boots crunched closer in the gravel. Every time he reached for his safety selector, his hands trembled just a little more. Hours ticked by. The sun climbed higher. Sweat rolled down the Lance Corporal's temples, soaking his uniform. His jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. And still, no mistakes. The truth was, he was a damn fine shooter. He knew the manual, he followed procedure. He wanted this qualification more than anything, because he knew exactly what failure meant. But my dad didn't need him to fail big. He just needed him to fail once. One small slip. One tiny lapse in discipline. And he'd been clear. That would be enough. By the time the final relay came around, the Lance Corporal's nerves were frayed. His shots still hit. His motions were still clean. But his eyes, they betrayed him. Every few seconds, he glanced sideways, like he couldn't help checking if my dad was still watching. And every single time, he found those same steady eyes locked on him. Cold. Patient. Relentless. The day dragged on, round after round, the sun beating down like a hammer. Marines were finishing their final strings of fire, rifles smoking, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and hot brass. For the Lance Corporal, this was the moment he had been clawing toward. He had shot clean. He had kept his form tight. He had followed every rule to the letter. It was almost over. He could see the finish line. All he had to do was complete the last, most basic step. Clear his weapon. It was routine. Simple. Muscle memory. Every Marine knows the process. Drop the magazine. Lock the bolt to the rear. Show the chamber, wide open, to the coach. Wait for the nod. Only then are you cleared to leave the line. The Lance Corporal went through the motions, his fingers trembling slightly from exhaustion and nerves. He dropped the mag. He racked the bolt. He pulled the charging handle back, letting the empty chamber gleam in the sunlight. And there it was, the critical moment. He turned, presenting the open chamber to my dad, who stepped in close, eyes narrowing to inspect. But before my dad could lean in, before he could give the confirming nod. Clack! The Lance Corporal let the bolt slam forward and shut the chamber. Then, without waiting, he slung his rifle and started walking off the line. My dad froze. For half a second, disbelief anchored him in place. Had he really just done that? Then the realization hit like a thunderclap. This was it. This was the safety violation he'd been waiting for. My dad's voice tore across the range, sharp and explosive. Stop. That's it. That's the safety violation I needed. Every Marine on the line turned, rifles frozen mid-clear, eyes snapping toward the eruption. The Lance Corporal spun around, face pale, eyes wide. What? No, Sergeant. Come on. That's bullshit. This is fucking bullshit. His voice cracked, panic surging through every syllable. But my dad was already stepping forward, towering over him. His voice was cold, final, and thunderous. Get the hell off my range. Now. The Lance Corporal's protests tumbled out, frantic and desperate. No. I showed it to you. You saw it was clear.
This isn't fair.
You can't.
But it didn't matter. The rule was iron.
Once that chamber snapped shut before inspection, it was a critical violation. On the range, safety isn't negotiable.
It isn't flexible.
And it sure as hell isn't subject to begging. The Lance Corporal had just disqualified himself. And with it, his career, already shaky from arrogance, was teetering on collapse.
He knew it.
Everyone watching knew it.
And my dad?
He just stood there, calm and immovable, the ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth.
The range had gone dead silent.
Marines up and down the line stood frozen, rifles half-cleared, watching the spectacle unfold.
It wasn't just about a mistake anymore.
This was about witnessing a man's pride implode in real time. The Lance Corporal's face was blotchy red, panic in every twitch of his jaw. He slammed his rifle down on the bench, chest heaving, eyes darting to the other coaches, to anyone who might give him an escape.
But no one moved.
Because they all knew. On the range,
safety violations weren't something you argued.
They weren't up for interpretation.
They were absolute.
And everyone understood exactly what had just happened. Everyone except the Lance Corporal. He staggered toward my dad, hands out, voice breaking.
Please. Sergeant, you saw it. You know I showed you.
Don't do this.
Don't.
My dad didn't flinch. His voice was steady, cold, almost surgical. You're done.
Pack your gear.
Leave my range. The Lance Corporal froze, lips trembling. He looked like he wanted to scream again, but something in my dad's tone cut deeper than rage could.
It wasn't anger. It wasn't even contempt.
It was finality. The kind of voice that told you this wasn't just about one mistake, it was about a reckoning.
Because my dad had promised. One mistake. That's all I need. And now it had come due.
The Lance Corporal's protest dissolved into bitter curses, muttered as he ripped off his gear and stormed off the line. Every Marine watched him go, their faces a mix of pity and grim satisfaction.
He'd been warned. He'd been told. And he thought he was too good to listen.
Now, stripped of qualification, his reputation was in tatters. And worse, the story would spread. Every Marine on that range would carry it back to their units.
His arrogance wasn't just exposed. It was immortalized.
For my dad, it was over in seconds.
He didn't gloat. He didn't need to.
He just turned back to the line, voice snapping sharp again. Eyes front. Continue clearing your weapons. The range roared back to life, but the atmosphere had shifted. A quiet, unspoken message lingered in the air.
Don't cross him. He'll wait. He'll watch.
And when you slip, he'll be there. And the Lance Corporal?
He never recovered.
The qualification he thought was locked in never came.
His shot at glory evaporated. His arrogance had been his downfall. And all because my dad had kept his word. He'd waited. He'd watched.
And when the moment came, he ended it, clean, precise, undeniable. That day, the Lance Corporal didn't just lose his qualification.
He lost his pride. He lost his standing.
He lost the one thing he thought he couldn't be touched on, his reputation as a Marine. And the best part?
It wasn't rage. It wasn't cruelty. It was patience.
The quiet kind of revenge that burns deeper than any outburst ever could. When the dust settled, the Lance Corporal didn't just walk off that range, he limped off, shoulders slumped, pride shattered. Word spread fast. Marines talk, and soon, every barracks, every chow hall, every smoke pit had the same story rolling through it. The hotshot Lance Corporal who thought he was untouchable, undone by one tiny mistake, with the sergeant never taking his eyes off him. The humiliation cut deeper than any punishment could. Because this wasn't some private scolding behind closed doors.
This was public. This was witnessed. And it was final.
For the rest of his career, however long it lasted, people wouldn't remember his perfect groupings or his textbook reloads. They'd remember the day he broke under the gaze of a man who warned him.
One mistake. That's all I need.
And that's what makes this revenge so perfect.
It wasn't loud. It wasn't messy.
It didn't come from anger. It came from patience.
My dad didn't need to chase him.
He didn't need to scream, threaten, or argue. He just waited, calm and steady, because arrogance always creates its own cracks. And when it did, he was there to split it wide open. That Lance Corporal thought he was better, sharper, untouchable. But in the end, all it took was one slip, and my dad turned his own confidence into the rope he hung himself with. The lesson? Arrogance burns itself out. Patience waits. And when you've got both discipline and time on your side, revenge doesn't just land, it leaves scars. That Lance Corporal thought he was teaching the Ranger lesson in marksmanship.
But my dad? He taught everyone on that line a far greater lesson.
One Lance Corporal, humiliated in front of an entire firing line. One reputation, shattered by arrogance. And one promise, kept by a man who knew the value of patience. My dad didn't need to scream, didn't need to argue, didn't even need to lift a finger.
He just waited. Quiet. Watchful. Steady.
Because he knew what arrogance does, it blinds people. It makes them sloppy. And eventually, it makes them destroy themselves. That Lance Corporal walked off thinking he could own the range. He left it broken, carrying a scar that would follow him the rest of his career.
And my dad? He walked away without a single crack in his composure.
Because real authority doesn't need to be loud, it needs to be final.
So maybe that's the takeaway.
Don't underestimate patience. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Because sometimes, the person you think is ignoring you is just waiting for you to hand them your downfall. Revenge doesn't always roar.
Sometimes it whispers.
And when it does, it cuts the deepest.
So, what do you think?
Did the Lance Corporal deserve what he got, or do you think my dad went too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm curious how you'd have handled it. And hey, if you enjoyed this story of patience, arrogance, and ultimate justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Because in the end, the best revenge is letting pride destroy itself.
No one's too good to fall.
Especially when their pride makes them blind.